Thanks, everyone. My name is Fergal Quinn. I want to welcome you all to this special event organised by the Journalism Department here in the University of Limerick in association with Research Week, entitled New Wars, New Challenges, Conflict Journalism in the 21st Century. So before I introduce you to our special guests, Luke and Lorcan, and get our first section underway, I want to set the scene a little bit. Prime you, so to speak. The world, as you may have noticed, is on fire. Everywhere we look, militarism is on the rise, and the institutional guardrails that have long held in the West seem to be crumbling. It's a bad picture out there just now. In the last 4 years alone, major conflicts have exploded in Ukraine, Palestine, Lebanon, and Iran, and other places. So, how does this relate to journalism, and why is the performance of journalism in this moment so important? Some of journalism's key normative roles are to bear witness, to speak truth to power, and to hold power to account. War is the ultimate expression of political power, or as military theorist Karl von Clausewitz put it, war is a continuation of politics by other means. Journalism work serves as a critically important before, after, and during the point where a disagreement turns to conflict, it turns to war. It helps to shape how war is conducted and understood. It tries to communicate the reality of what war looks like to those affected, and also to those in whose name war has been carried out. War in its unpredictability, its secrecy, its violence, is the ultimate test of the extent to which journalism can fulfill its mission. So our first event today tries to get a sense of what that looks like on the ground, both in the past and at present. So we're going to be talking to two prominent conflict journalism practitioners and asking the question, how does journalism act as witness in current and past conflict scenarios? Is journalism able to provide this independent, verified information that cuts through propaganda? And what are the obstacles to journalism continuing to do this? So our first segment here, it will run until 10 to 2 sharp, I'm told. Then we will have a 10-minute break before coming back at 2 p.m. sharp for a panel discussion about journalism and the war in Gaza. So without further ado, and excuse me on the technical front here, but let me introduce our two special guests today. Luke Hunt, on the top there, is one of the most experienced and respected war correspondents of the last 50 years. He served as bureau chief for AFP in Cambodia and in Afghanistan under Taliban occupation, where he was commended by the UN for his coverage of the Afghan civil war. Luke also covered the US-led invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq and the global war on terror that followed, specialising in Islamic militancy. Throughout the 2010s, he focused on civil conflict and uprisings from the Middle East to Asia, and he's still active in recent conflicts in Thailand and Cambodia and Myanmar. He's the author of The Punji Trap and the recipient of several awards, including the Hong Kong Human Rights Press Awards, Society of Publishers in Asia Award, and World Association of Newspapers Award. He's currently Southeast Asia correspondent for The Diplomat. And I just wanted just a short overview of some of his work through the years via a slideshow. This almost certainly won't work for me now, I'm sure. Sod's law. But let's see, guys. Just a moment. Where have we got it? Yes. Okay, so can we mix in this, guys, if possible? going to just come back to the lads here, if I may. Okay, so I'm going to get to Luke in a minute. There's, the mixing of the microphones is a bit tricky, so I'm going to be coming back to Luke in a moment. But if Luke sort of represents the grizzled veteran, I hope he doesn't mind me calling him that, of some of the most famous wars of the 20th century. Lorcan Lovett is the young gun, the up and comer, I suppose, who's plying his trade in one of the world's very many conflicts that is barely reported on at all. Lorcan is a Welsh journalist. He asked me to specify that he's Welsh. He's based in Southeast Asia, and he's been reporting across Asia and Europe, but with a focus on Myanmar since 2017. His work appears in The Guardian, The Observer, The Times, and he's featured NPR, BBC Radio and other radio programs. So again, his reporting from Myanmar, which is one of the most difficult places to report on in the world, was shortlisted for the Kurt Shork Awards, and he writes his own. He has his own Substack newsletter on Myanmar. So, okay, so I'm going to. I'm going to go, I suppose, to Luke first. Welcome here, welcome Luke and Lorcan first. So we're going to just talk to Luke for a few moments first. Luke, you can hear me okay, can't you? Good. I hope I haven't said anything untoward.
No, not at all. It's just interesting having a look at those photos. I don't think I've looked at them in 10 or 15 years, and they improve with age.
Okay. I suppose to begin with, Luke, just as a kind of a general opener, what drew you to journalism to begin with, and from there, what drew you to conflict journalism or war journalism?
I always had a natural bent towards humanities subjects at school, and when I was upset with Mum, I'd write her letters and stick them under a pillow. But not entirely sure why or how, but when I left school, I did a couple of other odds and bods, sort of journalist jobs that didn't make me happy. And I had done a bit of work on a school newspaper, and I really did like journalism. So I went to university. I studied there. I was the editor of the university newspaper. We broke a few stories. We got noticed, and it took off from there. When it comes to conflict, it's difficult to say why journalists cover it sounds a little bit perverse, if you take my meaning, but there is no bigger story than the organised slaughter of humanity by humanity. There is no bigger story. And I think journalists, if you're going to be worth half your salt, you want to cover the big stories, and they're the ones that matter. I mean, what we do, the older I get, the more I realise, but it's extraordinarily important. I mean, we can sit here at a wonderful university and discuss these sorts of issues and show photos and talk about what we've seen, which is good. But the amount of humans who have been obliterated and you've never heard their name, children who never got a shot at life, people who no one will remember, and I think there's something in the soul of humanity that requires us to at least report it, to at least try and give the outside world a dose of what it's like. And I just think that's what I think it's the most important story in the world, is the slaughter of man by man.
Luke, if I could come in there, can you tell me about your first frontline experience as a journalist? So the first experience you had of what you're talking about.
I mean, the very first run-in with the military was actually, I was a 20-year-old backpacker in Northern Ireland, and I was beaten up by an English soldier and had a gun shoved in my mouth. It was a sensitive time. I was in Falls Rock. I was in a Waldock Curtain area in Belfast, but it was about 4 months after Bobby Sands had died, and we'd been up there and told to get out. But kind of moving along, I've kind of traveled through a few areas and kind of worked as a journalist, and then I really got serious in when I joined AFP, and I was asked if I was interested in going to Kabul, and Afghanistan was supposed to have been written off as a story, as a real story at that point, but it continued and got very, very nasty between the Northern Alliance and the Taliban at the time, and there was a lot of bloodshed, and there were a lot of people killed. It was a civil war at that point, and I'd go back later. But civil wars, I'm sure as Lorcan knows, with Myanmar, are different, and they are like as Sri Lanka, Cambodia, the bloodshed and what people do to each other in a country which both sides already call their own is quite extraordinary. But the first experience, I think, is I'd landed in Kabul, and the office was directly behind the airport, which was being shelled daily, and being shelled for the first time with Scud missiles. It's quite an experience. If it lands within, say, the Scud, I think it was a Scud 6, if it lands within about 2 kilometres of a house, it will blow out every window, every door frame, and that's what it did. Everything was kind of taped up and we were in sandbags. But one of the interesting points was that I didn't know what was going on, and then all of a sudden we had a couple of dogs, and the dogs came scampering in, and they yelping, and they dived under a couch. At that point, the locals knew what was going to happen. They're like, the cook yard was like, "Well, come with me," and you stand inside the door jam like that, the architraves, and then the bomb goes off. Yeah, it's something else. Yeah, what a mess.
Luke, you were once one of the many stories that I've read about you and heard about you firsthand via mutual colleagues through the years, but you were once charged with espionage and threatened with execution by the Taliban in Kabul, only to be cleared later in court. Obviously, you came through that, but can you tell me about that experience or what happened?
Yeah, it wasn't my first run-in with the courts, but it was the Taliban. I was in a Sharia court, and I had to defend myself. But I'd written a story. There's a place called Maidan Shah up in the northeast of Afghanistan, which is near the border of Uzbekistan. It snows quite heavily there every year. And if the Taliban troops were battling Ahmad Shah Massoud, and they've really got to get in, conquer the land they want, and get out before the snow sets in. And they didn't get out, and they were trapped in by the snow. And I just wrote that as a story. The previous year, they were trapped and they'd been slaughtered. Now, what had happened was, this was with Agence France Presse, well, Radio Tehran took that story and reported that our reporter, as in Radio Tehran's report in Kabul, there's this, and they completely skewed it. They just butchered it. It read something like, the Taliban attract around Maidan Shah, and the Ahmad Shah Massoud forces are closing in around them, and they're all going to get slaughtered. And it was just a real picture of the way they did it. And so, I was probably charged for spying for the Iranians, which put me in an interesting position if I went there now. But I was put under house arrest. I was interrogated for 10 days. I appeared. They wanted me to publish an apology, like this is on the wire. So run on the wire exactly word for word what they had written. I said no, and I had to stand up and defend myself in a Sharia court, which is basically it's just a room, and there's about 50 bearded men or women in shower camouflages, kind of looking around and staring down at you. And my translator did a completely useless job, and it didn't help. So in the end, I took over and I just said what I could in English. And I said, no, I won't. I explained to them how a wire service works. And I went through point by point by point by point by point. And the information minister had said to me, if you're found guilty, and I'm sure you will be, I'll see you in the football stadium on Friday, which is when they used to do the execution and cut the arms and hands off thieves after going to prayers at the mosque. It was a kind of a Friday ritual. But anyway, I held to my, sorry, I was going to say held to my guns, but that's probably inappropriate. But I stuck to my story, and then it kind of ended convivially, and I had no idea what was going on. And then they all started to walk away, and I asked my translator, and then there was one chap, and I said, I just kind of said, what's going on? This Taliban official, official kind of juror, part judge, they all defer to senior people. He just, with a perfect English accent, a Plumbinese voice, said, it's okay, you can go home now, it's all right. Like, that's it. You know, that was kind of the end of it. But and then I had to go down to Kandahar afterwards and meet all the Taliban officials and be nice.
So just a normal day's work at the office, not unfamiliar to some of the staff here. I jest, of course. But Luke, I'm going to just go to Lorcan for a few moments also. If I may, just to give us a flavour of some of Lorcan's work. Lorcan, I'm not sure whether you can see what I'm showing here, but I'm just showing. So Lorcan is based in Southeast Asia, and he has focused on Myanmar since 2017. But to access Myanmar at the moment, it's very difficult. But just some of the photos from just a story from some of the brilliant work, and again the photos by Valeria Mongeli, who works with Lorcan a lot from Myanmar. So these were photos from the aftermath of the election there. And another really extraordinary profile piece that Lorcan did recently about a young sniper with the Chin militia, who have been fighting the ruling junta for the last 4 years. So, this girl, again, just an 18-year-old. So you're worrying about exams, and she is a sniper, essentially, working with the militia there. And just some amazing photos. This girl, her name escapes me, but anyway, an extraordinary story, and among lots of them that Lorcan has managed to work on. I'm just going to add spotlight, I think. Okay, so Lorcan, can you give me just a sense, I suppose, first of all, can you give me just a very brief overview of what's happening in Myanmar, or just the situation in Myanmar? Because again, the level of ignorance and disinterest in Myanmar in many countries is quite startling compared to a few years ago. So can you give me a quick update, a brief update as to the situation in Myanmar just now?
Yes. Pleasure to be with you, Fergal. Thank you for the invite, and pleasure to be with Luke and everybody in the room and watching online as well. So, keeping it very brief, what happened with Myanmar? It's a country in Southeast Asia, next to India and China, 55 million people. It was on the path to democracy. There was a party called the NLD, which was led by a very famous woman you might have heard of, called Aung San Suu Kyi. And military still had control over elements of the government and had 25% allocated seats in parliament. But there was a lot of optimism that Myanmar would actually become a full democracy and they would change the military drafted constitution. However, in 2021, the 1st of February, everybody in Myanmar will remember that morning, the soldiers came in onto the streets. They arrested Aung San Suu Kyi in the early morning and all of the newly elected politicians from that 2020 election, and put them in jail. obviously, can you imagine how young people felt when this democracy they almost had just suddenly evaporated, and it was the military back in control, the same military that had controlled the country for decades, a very brutal, oppressive military. So they came out to the streets. It's not a surprise, right? Most like Gen Z would do that if it happened in their country. And the soldiers, as many predicted, came out as well and shot them down and killed many of these young people. So they ran to the jungle. A lot of these protesters ran to the peripheries of the country where there was already ethnic insurgencies against the state and the military. And they asked them for training, they asked them for weapons. And within a few months, the military was faced with this multiple front lines of this like nationwide uprising. So there was a full-on revolution, and that's what's happening now. It's a revolution to topple the military regime. But there are so many other things going on that the resistance itself is so divided. There's so many different interests. And now what we're seeing is a resurgent Myanmar military regime, which was really on the ropes in 2023, but is now coming back quite strong thanks to drone warfare, thanks to China and Russia, thanks to forced conscription. So the junta chief, Min Aung Hlaing, has made himself president. He gave himself the biggest promotion that's possible. And the resistance is still fighting, but at the moment it seems the military has the upper hand.
Okay, I suppose, and thanks for that summary. I suppose just to give a sense of what your work looks like, Lorcan, we were discussing just one particular story, and again, it caught my eye, the sniper story, and I think I may have been complaining about my day and asking Lorcan about how he goes about covering a story like that, the logistics. Just describe to me. So a story like that you see some amazing pictures of and terrific text to go with them. But just describe to me the logistics of you covering this as an independent journalist. So just that specific story.
Well, that specific story began when I was texting a source who was based in Western Myanmar in the mountains of Chin State. And he mentioned that there was this really talented sniper. So we were just chatting about the sniper, and he was like, "Oh yeah, she's like a 17-year-old girl." And I was like, "Whoa, that's unusual. I would love to go out there and meet her." And we spent some time in near the front line there. But how do you get into a place like that where you can't land in military-controlled Yangon, because you would just be arrested straight away if they knew what you wanted to do? And even if they didn't know, trying to get there from Yangon is dangerous because there are so many different regime checkpoints along the way. So in order to get to resistance-controlled Myanmar, you have to cross in from other countries. You can't land into Myanmar to do it, more often than not. So in that case, I can't go into too much detail, otherwise I won't be able to do these stories again. But look at Myanmar on the map, you'll see it borders Bangladesh, India, and China on that side. So I had to go to one of those countries and travel, across the mountains there, do a bit of sneaky stuff to try to get across the border and to meet the resistance fighters. The whole thing can take, it depends what part of Myanmar you're going in, but it can take 3 weeks sometimes to do that.
So that's all just for one story, which might work out, which might not work out. That sometimes you get to where you think the story is and it's not there, or it doesn't pan out, or whatever. So just to get a sense of the logistics of some of these stories. What are the challenges, Lorcan? So you're an independent journalist. Essentially, you work freelance and independently. You're not affiliated with or covered by your expenses by any particular organisations. Talk to me about the challenge of covering a conflict that the world seems to have so much less interest in. I mean, it had lots of interest in Aung San Suu Kyi, and there was a flurry of interest in the region around that period. And now, much less so, compared to the war in Iran or Palestine or Ukraine. What are the challenges in that regard? So just trying to get people interested in what's happening there.
Well, I'm an independent journalist in part because I'm totally engrossed by Myanmar, and there's not many jobs where you can just write about Myanmar. So you kind of have to make your own job if you want to do what you really want to do in this kind of niche area. So yeah, I find Myanmar like totally fascinating. And in terms of how it's difficult to kind of maybe convince editors really to get editors need a bit more convincing than they would compared to say Iran, for instance. Myanmar stories might have to be that much more unique or unusual to run in international outlets. I imagine it's the same for some other countries like Sudan or Congo or something. So yes, you need to be honed in and have an attuned sense of what makes a story, what an international audience, or more accurately, what an editor discerns an international audience would be interested in. But if you're enthusiastic enough and if you've spent enough time studying a country or a topic, and you've worked out how to communicate the stories in a compelling but true way, then I believe that the audience will come eventually. So, I mean, international outlets do run stories on Myanmar, just not, I suppose, that often. I also have the Substack, as you said, because on these trips you see so many amazing things, and your notebook it gets filled immediately with so many amazing stories. I don't want to come back home and then just have to write one story. I want to I don't know, if you're like butchering a cow, you want to use every part of the cow. You don't want to waste any meat, right? So the Substack allows me to also report on various insights and people I've met, but also to monetize that in a modest way as well. And I think for Myanmar, well, there's not many focal points for Myanmar now. As you said, Aung San Suu Kyi has kind of disappeared. Well, she's actually held in jail incommunicado by the military. And unless like a big town is being captured by the rebels, it's usually out of the headlines. And as you said, access is very difficult as well. What makes it kind of difficult to sell to an international audience is that Myanmar is, Luke will know this, like Myanmar is a very complex country. It's full of different ethnicities and languages. And it's also often cited as having the longest running civil war in the world, which has started basically just after World War II. So then you have to explain to people why this is new, right? Why, there are peripheral ethnic conflicts, but why is this one new for Myanmar, which it is?
Okay.
But I do think the West still covers Myanmar more so than probably regional countries around Southeast Asia do, which is quite bizarre.
And if I could just come in, and again, we don't have to name the outlet, but I think it's just important to emphasize just the difficulty of independent journalists having to work. Lorcan, you mentioned the rate of pay in one instance, a very reputable and wealthy outlet, but if you don't mind me saying, for a story that took 4 days' work trekking around the jungles of Myanmar, can you share with us what that rate was, or shall I?
No, I'm happy. We should talk about these things. So that was actually on the border, not inside Myanmar, but it was quite a few days' work, and it was £130 for a feature from, as you said, quite a big outlet. Now, that's just simply not enough, right? I'm not saying that all outlets are like that. And also, if there are any freelance journalists in the audience or students who want to be, I would recommend that you find editors who you really like and you can work well with, and you build up a relationship with them. And yeah, I mean, for me, with that case, because I work with Valeria, who's a great photographer, she gets paid for the photos, and then we go 50-50 on the pay. So sometimes like the writing will be more, sometimes the photos will be more, but that's how we kind of get some parity. But yeah, that was for the text, that was £150. I mean, that's the state of the industry, you know?
Yeah, and Luke, I'm going to come back to you again, and just and we can kind of over and back between you on some of these questions. But Luke, just war journalists or conflict journalists sometimes are faced with the choice when reporting about having to whether to intervene in certain situations or continue reporting the story in specific scenarios. You know, have you ever faced a moment like that? And how do you navigate the border between being an observer, a professional observer, and being a human being?
Well, we need to take a step back. The way I was trained and what I was told was important, particularly when I started in Kabul, is rule number one: you don't get dead or wounded, because your job is to look after the local staff. And rule number two is your local staff don't get dead or wounded. Rule number three is that the Bureau stays open. And rule number four is you can consider the story. So I've been in situations where we've driven out people who are being bombed and under attack. We've driven them out. Been in situations where I once ordered a Marine to shoot dogs on the front line because they were eating humans. He didn't refuse me. I had that clout, by the way. I was a similar rank to a major. But he did say, "Sir, if I shoot those dogs, we'll give away our position." There were other situations where you do stop work and you do help the wounded people. But I've done 3 or 4 hostile environment courses, a couple of boot camps, and I'm a trained first responder. Now, going back to rule number 1, 2, 3, and 4, you have to, if you're in that situation, follow your conscience by all means. If you can help and you think it's the right thing to do, then by all means do it. But you have to ask yourself, are you going to help? Or are you going to make the situation worse? Now, a trained first responder will know how to pat down a body, looking for small shrapnel wounds, particularly tiny ones. Will know how to pick up a body and carry it out of the firing line. Will know how to scope and how to react. Now, if you're looking after someone who's wounded, then ideally what would happen is you'll get a tap on the shoulder by someone who's more qualified than you are, and they will then take over. Now, it's extremely difficult when bad things are happening and you want to help. You really have to ask yourself, what are you going to do, and can you do it successfully, or will you make the situation worse? And the situations are many and varied, and it's impossible to answer that. You have one answer for that question. Are you talking about helicopters landing? Are you talking about bombs going off, cars coming under fire? Refugees is a little bit easier, and when you've got women and children running, yes, we've stopped work and we've driven in, picked them up and driven them out. But it's a question that only a journalist can answer when they are in that given moment, and they need to ask it. The first rule of the first responder is to stop, look, and decide whether you can help. Now, a lot of journalists have been killed trying to help, and that is to be avoided. I don't want to sound callous or being ruthless, but you know, anybody dead. And so it really depends very much on the situation. If it comes down to the story, like, am I going to lose the story? Am I not going to file? And you can help, then yeah, bugger the story. No problems. If you can help, go in and do it. But you have to make sure you're safe and make sure you're not going to get anyone else hurt as well.
Again, another famous anecdote. Again, if you don't mind, the kind of typical Aussie bravado. In one scenario where it was, somebody asked you, why are you going to Baghdad following this story with the army to Baghdad during the Iraq War, and you said something like, "Oh, there's beer in Baghdad." I think that was the famous quote that's kind of stuck to you ever since, for good and for bad. But I think underneath the joke, I suppose it does speak to the kind of trauma that goes with this kind of work, and what we use to, whether it's alcohol or whatever, to ease it. So beyond humour, like, how do you process what you see in your day-to-day work and the long-term trauma, I suppose, of 3 decades on the front line. So if I could speak, just get that from you, Luke, and I'd like to hear Lorcan on that as well. So Luke, first of all, how do you process all of this stuff? How do you decompress?
You seriously need time out. When I was in Afghanistan, I had 6 weeks in, 6 weeks out. Depends on the length. That Iraq was a lot longer. You need to have normal friends. It's great to have a healthy family environment. You need to chill out in your own time. PTSD, actually, while I had the attention of academics, a lot of people with PTSD would like to see the D drop because it's not a disorder. It's a very normal kind of reaction that you go through. But you're in such a heightened state of alert that when you finally get out, you basically collapse. Your body just completely relaxes. I slept for about 6 weeks, I think, after Iraq, and you really need to process and think about it, but you need to do it in your own time. I mean, I had what's called survivor's syndrome, which is a bit like, I did it. What about? That's not fair. It can take on more hideous kind of side to it, but I was okay. But one of the biggest issues I've seen with PTSD, and I mean this for the younger audience, is that the people who develop serious issues, and the photograph that you showed of the 3 Marines standing in, actually no, medics embedded with the Marines that were standing by in front of the tank. That was Stephen Head, Ryan Chabez in the middle, and Charles Hall. Ryan Chabez committed suicide about 2-3 years ago. It was sad, just bloody sad. The point is that what I've found is that people who have existing issues and they go into the field, they come out with PTSD. A lot of them get on the alcohol, get on the drugs. The war becomes an excuse for everything that's gone wrong with their lives, and they have never dealt with the issues that are actually the root cause of what's wrong with them. And I've seen this time and time again. I know of one chap who's badly PTSD, and he still can't confront the issue, but he left his wife and 5 kids so he could go and become a war correspondent. He kind of wanted it too much. And this is just kind of going back and around in his head, and he's still madly on the Irish whiskey, but it's a good drop. Okay. But it's you need good people around you. You need to chill out. You need to think about it, and you need to and you kind of need to assess it all the way through. And being a journalist actually helps because you can sit down and write about it, and that goes a long way.
Lorcan, could I bring you in on that as well? And again, you, working as an independent journalist, often maybe not necessarily having the newsroom supports at times that if somebody is attached to a particular news organisation might have, or the aftercare or whatever. How do you manage just dealing with the things that you see in the line of your work?
I don't have a very healthy answer for that, to be honest. But I think what Luke said is, Luke's experience is incomparable. So I think he's much better placed to answer that. For me, I just try. If there is something, I just push it down and think I'll deal with it later. So, but I don't do that. I wouldn't recommend that really. I've got friends and family who go to therapy, and they say it's really good. And so I think that's a great option as well. I definitely avoid trying to use a crutch or something like that, and try to speak openly with my close friends and family about things. But again, I don't feel I go and I do a job and I don't feel I don't feel necessarily traumatized, but I haven't been through what Luke has been through either. So I just try to be respectful and humble among the people whose lives I'm entering in those situations, do the job, get out. And if there's something, yeah, I mean, it's good to talk about it, but yeah, I probably kicked the can down the road a bit too much.
Okay, a very honest answer there, Lorcan. Hopefully your mum isn't listening in. But that's just one thing I wanted to come to, and I think you both have insight into this, but and Luke, you've had the experience of reporting as an embedded reporter, so kind of a journalist embedded with the military in conflict scenarios, and then working separately in other, not as an embedded. You've experienced both types. Lorcan, you've kind of experienced different types in terms of access. But I suppose, can you talk about just the types of government and military tactics to kind of mollify journalism, I suppose, to soften it, to kind of control it in conflict scenarios? Can you talk to me about that, just your experience to your career, Luke, and also Lorcan? But we'll start with Luke.
Yeah, it's changed enormously. And say the invasion of Iraq and what's happening now with Iran. In October 2022, I was sent to Japan to cover the OPEC Oil Ministers Conference. And there were all these war correspondents there because we knew what was going to happen. And it was all about the price of oil. And yeah, people were saying it wouldn't happen, the debate, that kind of thing. So, okay. And then in early January, I went to Kuwait. I spent 6 weeks basically setting up the logistics for about 22 journalists and photographers to go over the border. It included kit, what do you buy, relations with the military. Now, I don't want to go too holistic, but obviously our present is based on where we come from, and we had this enormous tradition of newspapers. You can track war correspondence back to the Crimea War, and acceptance and respect of what journalists did. War correspondents tend to come from the big news organisations, and even if the military didn't particularly like you, they still looked up after you. You had respect. You carried rank. And we've watched that slowly dissipate over the years, which has got to do with the digitalisation, the lack of money. I'm optimistic. I'm not completely pessimistic about the outlook at all. In fact, I think it will improve. But we don't have foreign correspondents covering wars anymore. Lorcan exceptionally does a wonderful job. I hear really nice things about him behind his back. And it's when I was the bureau chief in Cambodia, I'm from Australia. I work for a French news organisation. I have a well-documented past. I have local staff. I look after them. Well, that's all gone. And so the local journalists are left on their own. And they do all the heavy lifting, as in Gaza. They can't rely on the backing of the CNN. They can't, Netanyahu isn't sitting back worrying about a call from the White House saying, you shouldn't have heard that Washington Post reporter. He's one of ours. That's not going to happen. And so we've seen this sort of disintegration of the way things were into kind of, there's a lot of, kind of, not just confusion, but there's no hierarchy or structure the way there used to be. And that is absolutely evident with what's happening in Iran and what happened in Gaza. And, I think his name's Sean Sutton. I had a beer with him in Bangkok not long ago. He's credited with, he's a British photographer. He's credited with being the only foreign journalist in Gaza. He was there at the start with an NGO. He just happened to be there. And so what's happening in Gaza, and it's happening increasingly around the world. I covered the Cambodian Thai 6-month war last year, which I'd be surprised if anyone's heard of it. But there's half a dozen journalists in a Cambodian prison because of comments they made on Facebook. No one cares. There's a couple of journalists in there. Rule out, just for students' sake, a very important rule when covering wars is you never give away a military position. Doesn't matter if you're with the Taliban or the Americans, you never give away a military position. There's two photographers in a Cambodian prison because they took a selfie of themselves with a general and accidentally gave away a roadside.
Okay.
There's no, the whole thing is just kind of I mean, you know, if it wasn't so serious, it'd be a Keystone Cops show. It's just, it's a comedy. It's a rampant comedy.
Okay, well, look, we're coming close to the end. Unfortunately, the time has flown by. But just to wrap up, I suppose, just a final comment from both of you. Just what advice do you have for young journalists, new journalists, or practicing journalists, in terms of the type of approach they should be taking to try to engage audiences with these complex international stories, or the less covered conflicts? You know, at a time of, I've heard it referred to as conflict fatigue. You know, audiences are kind of switching off from these stories, and they don't want to, you know, they don't want to hear about them in some instances, and the stories are the most important. What advice would you have in terms of trying to cut through that and engaging audiences? What type of stories should people be focusing on as journalists? Lorcan, just briefly, could you come in on that, and then Luke, and we'll wrap it up then.
Yeah, I think conflict fatigue is real, and people think, oh, there's so much going on in the world, so there's no point in me trying to learn about it all. But also, I think there's still a huge curiosity and interest about the different situations across the world. We're just seeing it in different formats. So people these days are much less likely to sit down with like a 5,000 word feature, but you can see on social media with Instagram Reels or TikTok or wherever, these videos about different rules and conflicts are still like massively shared. So the interest is still there. It's about how to tap into it and how to engage with it in a way that's true to what you want to do creatively as well. I think what I would say is that, like, as technology improves, the old school basics become more and more important. Like, make sure to develop your contacts. That's probably one of the most important, is the most important thing you have as a reporter, is your contacts, and your knowledge of the situation. Develop your networks, work with other journalists, definitely local reporters, collaborate with them, and take risks, but with a purpose and with a plan as well. Going on the ground is more key than ever. All the old school stuff is like more key than ever. Try to stay away from AI too much. Obviously, we're all going to use AI, but if you allow AI to do your writing for you, it just comes out as some kind of empty, vacuous, meaningless thing, and you won't really know what it says. And if somebody calls you out for it and says, hey, that's wrong in that story, you might not even know how to defend it because like, you barely wrote it, right? So try to stay away from AI too much. I'm not saying don't use it, but like just keep your distance a little bit, and then do the old school stuff. Protect your sources, ensure consent on the ground, and make sure you're trying to push the story forward and bring something new to audiences. And yeah, that's it really.
Thanks, Lorcan. Luke, if you could come in just quickly on that. It's a big one, I know, but
I can't say it any better than what Lorcan said. He said it very, very well. One piece of advice is, if you're going to cover a conflict or a country you haven't been to before, or check in by asking people who have been there. Ask them to name 6 books in regards to the conflict or the country, and read them. And when you get there, be professional. Be a stand-up person. Make sure your kit is in excellent condition. The amount of stories and stuff that never got told because batteries broke down, or because they just didn't have the right kit, all that sort of stuff. Be professional and be courteous, and look out for the locals and they'll look out for you.
Okay, look, I'm going to have to leave it there, folks. Lorcan and Luke, it was a pleasure hearing from you. We really enjoyed hearing about that. Not close to enough time on it, unfortunately, but thanks for the insight.